Welcome to Beyond the Steps. So, William, you are the CEO of Nutrasource. Please give us a bit of the background on Nutrasource, your legacy, how long you guys have been around, et cetera. I'd love to hear some more.
Absolutely. So Nutrasource is a company which I helped co-found with a professor from the University of Guelph here, which is about an hour outside of Toronto in Ontario, Canada. Started almost 21 years ago now.
Nice.
And the basis for the company was originally a nutritional diagnostic looking at omega-3 markers in the blood and correlating it to heart disease risk and death from heart attack risk. And from there, over the last 20 years, we've grown to become one of the premier global services provider to the nutritional industry. We have over 375 clients globally, internationally, in all different regions and markets. And we've moved well beyond a diagnostic company to offering full-service clinical trials, for full-service regulatory for the US and Canada, with some work in some other countries as well, and testing-based certifications around non-GMOs, marine oils, and a new program called NutriStrong that covers most nutritional categories. So we really offer a full-service platform to all levels of the supply chain, from food to pharmaceuticals, but really tied to nutritional sciences. So, for example, if a probiotic or an omega-3 or some other botanical wants to go the pharmaceutical pathway, that's great. We can accommodate that and support that on behalf of our clients, but we don't deal with new molecular entities and molecules. That's not our gig.
Or anything synthetic, right?
Right. Anything super synthetic, pharmaceutical in nature, we don't touch that typically. It's more on it's got to start in nature or nutritional sciences. So
that kind of leads me into something we talked about yesterday, the brand management that you guys really do and you support through your processes. You give your clients strategy, you give them direction, which is, I think, what sets you apart and why we're actually on this call. A lot of companies don't do that. You know, clients come in and they say, formulate for me, and they get a formulation and then it's sent to manufacturing procurement. You guys dive in and help them market. You want to go into that a little bit?
Absolutely. So what happens is a lot of our customers, it's in the innovation stage, product development stage. And even if they're a global multinational, this particular project or program they're looking at, the innovation piece they're looking at is for future market launch. Mm-hmm. And that future market launch involves really product strategy, whether they're an ingredient company or a formulator or a finished product brand. How am I getting my product to market? So rather than just accepting the notion that, hey, they want a clinical run or they want to get registered with the FDA or Health Canada for this or that.
They want to make a claim, yeah.
They want to make a substantiated claim around efficacy or an indication, whatever it happens to be. We want to get into the strategy side of, why are you doing this? What is your true business objective? Mm-hmm. How does it support your intellectual property position? What are your regulatory options? What other claims might be available to you based on the literature that you're not even anticipating as the sponsor, as the client? And let's look at the holistic strategy before we simply just propose something, run a project and say, here's your data, have a nice day. So we really try and dig in deeper, build the whole strategy piece to ensure that everything that we propose maps back to those boxes that need to be checked to support the strategy and market launch.
So I think with that future market launch, you can take something from inception and help support it and help them get a clearer direction, but also too, on the other end of things, existing products, you also extend the life on that. So you help people initially, but then you can help those established brands continue. Well, you know what I'm trying to get to. I don't want to spill the beans, but go ahead.
No, label extension wise and product life cycle wise, what innovation can occur? Maybe there's a SKU that a brand has out there in the market and it feels like it's run its course. It's been a 3 to 5 year run, 5 to 7 year run, and it's really, hey, this SKU's really started to taper off. It's crested. It's on the downslope. What can we do to reinvigorate it? Is that pivot to companion animals and pet products and supplements? Is that looking at another human indication that we hadn't thought of, that if we studied this now, we would get get a whole new SKU, same formula, or we could add that potential claim if the data backed it up to the actual label to create a whole nother market segment or a whole nother market category that we can target. The other big piece of that on the label extension and extending SKU life cycle is, what other countries are we interested in? And what do those countries need to see? So yes, we're big in the US, we've trickled into Canada, we're dabbling in the EU, but what other countries can we attack and go after for market launch? And what are the nuanced changes those regulators need to see in order for us to get extension on our product SKUs and our product life cycle? What innovation can occur? So we really like to understand that, because there's a ton of value in that, and our clients appreciate those discussions and also see the value.
Well, also too, because the regulation internationally is just, all over the place. So the fact that you guys dive in and help people navigate their product in different countries, that as well sets you apart. That's something we do here at Leaf too, which kind of, I want to segue into the next topic. Something that sets you apart from the beginning, from our initial conversations, was the fact that you knew about trends before they were on the market. And the fact that trade magazines come to you before they publish the upcoming trends. And I'd like you to go into that and how it, we talked about the trend of the supplements for animals, the companion animal, right? And we can dive into that. Everybody knows, like I said, we're making chewable tablets for dogs left and right here. But let us, tell me a little bit more about, your trade or your trend predictions.
Yeah, so the interesting thing with us is, because we're always seeing the innovation pipeline pre-market launch, we're getting insights into the trends and the focus areas of what companies are looking to do and launch around 12 to maybe even up to 36 months from now. So for instance, on the companion animal side, during COVID, when so many folks were buying pets because they were staying at home and who knew how long it was going to last, that pet ownership group really, really grew. And with that, interest in higher end products for pets, both on the pet food side, but also on the quote unquote pet supplement side, really took off. So clients that had, say, ingredients or formulas or branded SKUs for areas of human health and human wellness all of a sudden said, hey, how can I port this SKU that's positioned to humans to their companion animals? That
label extension.
Yes, and how do I extend my formula in the life cycle and reinvigorate it? And that's a prime example of that. And we saw that trend actually starting very early on in COVID, and now it's talked about almost, in every trade magazine issue or newsletter or update, there seems to be a piece on companion animals and supplements and ingredients positioned for that particular market in the US and in other countries for that matter. And as a result, we saw that kind of trend occurring well before it was being talked about in our trade magazines and with the various trade groups. And with that too, because we're not in the supply side and the product and inventory side of nutritional science industry globally, we're on the services side, and we see such a smattering of types of products, that really gives us a very unique vantage point. So the trade magazines, the earned and unearned media in our industry, we work very closely with them, as well as sitting on committees of the trade associations to help them be prepared and ready when they want content, need content for certain pieces. Hey, I heard companion animals is a hot area. Is there something you can put together based upon what you're seeing? Then we can respond to that proactively and give them really good content ahead of time.
Yeah, and what you're doing too is stepping back to the client level of things, is if you're giving them a label extension or a product extension, if you will, moving a supplement or a raw material into, the animal space, you've just saved them tons of money in excess inventory loss.
That's correct.
I know you're on the services part of things, but that's on the manufacturing end, and it just bleeds right into it. We can
influence and impact that and get some economy and efficiency in there. So instead of doing a production run for a SKU based upon one label, if we can get 2, 3, 4 differently positioned labels, but it's the same base formula ultimately and product going into those bottles, but the science aligns and we work with the client to align the science, then all of a sudden they have 4 SKUs out of perhaps 1 SKU that was kind of on the way out or tailing off a bit.
And you're saving them time because they're not reinventing the wheel.
Correct. And they're doing bigger production runs, so there's some efficiency in cost and time to pick up there as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of brings me to a topic I wanted to cover with you. You know, as you're saying you're on the service side, and I'm saying, well, you're bleeding into the manufacturing side. Leaf, we are the manufacturer. We dabble in a lot, but we're the manufacturer. You're on the services side. How does Nutrasource and a manufacturer like Leaf, how do we pair up? How do we work together? What do you usually see when you work with a manufacturing partner?
Yeah, great question. So there are multiple fronts on this. So oftentimes on the contract manufacturer side, you're getting information from your client who would also potentially be our client or prospect at the very least, and vice versa. And in that respect, there may be regulatory flags you're seeing in what they're providing label-wise or how they're hoping to position the product. And sometimes for contract manufacturers, the regulatory piece, I'm talking about government regulatory, not quality regulatory from a GMP perspective, but the actual, hey, what would a regulator, FDA, Health Canada, EFSA, EMA, wherever they are in the world, what would they think of this label? Is it properly substantiated based upon the wording, the claims, and so forth? That's where we work with contract manufacturers as a support and as a bridge in those discussions and dialogue. Then if a clinical is required to support a gap in the data, because the sponsor says, this is the target market I want to go after, these are the claims I want to support. If you think I'm weak in that area, then let's run a study to shore that up and close that gap. The other thing on the testing-based certifications, that's also where we work with contract manufacturers because they can build loyalty program components and they can showcase quality. So as a company, we've really morphed towards, instead of just taking on all business from everywhere, we're in the interesting position where we can really select who our customers and key accounts are and where we put our focus and attention. And we focused on servicing and showcasing the A-level players in the industry. So in my mind, I always put any industry in like 3 categories, A, B, C, and then, there's some F minuses out there too, but really A, B, C, and we want to work with the A players, and that's where we focus. We consider ourselves an A player service provider, so we want to work with those firms where we can help showcase each other and help refer good quality work, especially in the U.S. market where dietary supplements are obviously regulated under GMP. Everyone who's in the game knows that. But beyond that, because of lack of FDA enforcement, there's so much room for abuse. I do get frustrated, like many do, when certain talking heads will say, well, the dietary supplement industry isn't regulated in the U.S. Well, that's not true. It is. But there are big, open, ambiguous areas open to interpretation. That's often where the lawyers get involved. But for brand protection, the brands that play in that A level, it's really up to themselves. They get to
regulate themselves.
Get to decide which tier they want to play in. So we want to work with those that are playing in the A tier, want to put science first in support of their product, and we want to help them get there along that journey.
Can you help me kind of bridge your workforce into this? So you're talking about the clinical studies. What does it look like when someone comes to you, they want a clinical study done? What does your team look like?
Yeah, great question. So we have a clinical trials questionnaire that we get people to complete. And we have sort of the business and tech teams. So one of the things that we did very early on that really helped us create our leadership position in clinical trials was putting together a business development team that included the technical group, not just the more salesy types, because it's technical sales. So obviously our sales staff have technical knowledge in clinical trials, but they're not the ones intimately involved in the studies. So we bridged that gap very early on. So those discussions in clinical trial design, I compare it to custom home building. You want to meet with the architects, you want to transfer it from the architect blueprints to a general contractor in their trades. So we have the architect team and the general contractor within the Nutrasource ecosystem as part of that client experience. And then depending on where we're running the studies, so we have a site here in Guelph, Ontario, where we run many studies, but we also have a network of over 400 sites across the US that we work with.
Okay.
They aren't our sites, but we work with them on the CRO side to place studies. So if it's a women's health study, we want to place that at a women's clinic. If it's a sports nutrition study, we want it in appropriate sports nutrition, exercise physiology type clinic setting with the appropriate tools for the sponsor. So it's very protocol dependent. And we work through that. Some studies need to recruit multi-center. So if we're doing an infant formula study where we're doing a growth and development a project for U.S. market entry on novel infant formula, we need to have multiple sites because you're not going to get all those babies in a reasonable amount of time from one site.
So every project is highly curated. Highly curated. Yeah, but internally too, I know you've been in business for 21 years. I mean, I'm sure you started with one employee. How big are you now? What's your workforce look like just internally right now?
So we've grown from that one original staff member up to roughly around 150 now.
Nice.
And with that, roughly half of them are dedicated to various aspects of clinical trials delivery. So we have a medical writing team, a data management team, a biostatistics team, a project management team, and all of them work together along with clinic staff and CRAs that go out and monitor the sites and help control the studies and the risk management of the sites when it's not our site upstairs here. All of those are unique teams that work synergistically to deliver the study to our clients.
So I want to tie that all back in. We talked about brand strategy and management, which I think we really align on. We talked about the trends and how you're really at the forefront, which sets you apart. Leaf, we're at the forefront as well because we're doing that formulation. I think it's fantastic that companies like us can compare up together because we've got the insight before it gets out, right? And that's what sets us apart. And we talked about how we can collaborate. When our clientele needs clinical studies, when we have regulatory questions, from just the GMP to the FDA regulations to DSHEA claims, that's how Leaf can work with Nutrasource.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Or if your client shows up and says, hey, I want you to formulate this for this area of health. We want to launch a product into women's health or men's health or weight management or metabolic syndrome, whatever it happens to be. These are the type of ingredients we're thinking about. From a contractor perspective, a contract manufacturer perspective, Leaf Labs is putting together the formulation on the bench. How do these ingredients work together? How can they be put into a formula that works in the real world?
Right.
Stability-wise, synergistically, we're on the theoretical side saying, if you change this dose and that dose, these are the claims available to you based upon the published literature, or if the sponsors already run clinical studies and they have their own data set as well, we can put the data set from their own product-specific work they've done alongside what's in the third-party literature, look at it holistically and say, hey, if you tweak this level of selenium or this level of D or this level of EP or DHA, these claims could now be supported. And you have maybe 2 structure function claims instead of 1, or you have this positioning out in the marketplace. The other big area where we work together with contract manufacturers is a lot of testing occurs at the contract manufacturing stage. One of the big areas that I think is underrepresented in marketing in our industry is stability, because everyone looks at GMP standard is 2 years stability, right? But a lot of companies don't run their stability programs to ICH level because they're not aware of it for cost, so that they can do, where appropriate, also not just real time but accelerated stability models. So zone 4 ICH just means all 4 climate regions in the world as defined by ICH. And then how does that port to the manufacturing side in terms of storage and stability, packaging and stability, to optimize the expiration date and the actual shelf life of the product if they decide to all of a sudden distribute in another climate zone, or the climate zones that already exist in, say, North America. So with that in mind too, how is that brought into the stability program? Then I've seen this so often where people say, yeah, we're 2-year shelf life stable. I'll say, great. Are you going to month 30. You have plans to go beyond that, right? To month 36. Oh no, we shut it down because we were stable at 2 years. So, well, why wouldn't you keep that alive and going?
Yeah.
You've met the minimum, great. You're good to go for 2 years, but keep the party going.
And this is just another way that what you guys do bleeds into what we do. You're extending that life that we can keep the raw material here, because who knows if it's not moving fast by, end of year 1, how much money are they going to lose? So you're saving the client money in the long run. And I think I kind of want to pull it back to something that resonated with me personally as a dietitian, is that efficacious dose. When you're saying in formulation, let's tweak it so that these work synergistically and actually do something for the consumer.
Yes.
In a lot of, and to make that structure function claim, if you go to your supplement store and you get a supplement, a lot of them don't have structure function claims, and there's not even enough of anything in the capsule to do anything, right?
The payload's not there.
Yeah. So you're not just helping the client at that point, you're helping the consumer. So I love it. Love it. Mm-hmm.
And then on the certification side, that's where we showcase the A players in the industry globally, their commitment to quality, their corporate values, their commitment to testing and GMP, their testing to other certifications. So the way our certifications work, it's sort of an aggregator where we show, hey, this brand also has say Friends of the Sea or Marine Sustainability or non-GMO project, or pick your certification, upcycling certified, whatever it happens to be, we can showcase that as well as part of their commitment to excellence and quality, beyond simply saying, yes, we're GMP compliant for dietary supplements in the US.
Right.
That to me is kind of like the baseline, right? That's the minimum bar to pass.
Yeah.
But once you get past there, how do you set that differentiation? And that's where with platforms, for the A-level players, it becomes very frustrating in environments, say like Amazon, where it's really hard for the consumer to discern who is truly giving me, they all give A-level messaging, but who's the A player giving me A-level messaging, and who's the C actual player giving me A-level messaging?
Yes.
And they'll often then just default to price, and they have no idea, and they have no way to unpack this. So part of our certifications is to deliver that message to consumers that in a third-party fashion, you can trust these brands because they're actually not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk as well.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think that's one thing that's hard for consumers right now. And I get a lot of questions, going from brick and mortar, being able to physically hold that bottle and look at the certifications and, seeing the quality of it. And now the majority of people who get stuff on Amazon, there's such, it's such a different purchasing process. They wonder, is this quality? And you don't really know until it's, in your kitchen cabinet and you're taking it. So having those certifications just sets the product apart as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing with these ingredients too is, depending on how they're formulated, they can become pharmaceuticals, right? So when I look at certain botanicals, whether they're raw leaf extract or isolate, when we look at omega-3s, probiotics, vitamin D, selenium, there are other examples of these ingredients where if you ratchet up the dose recommended to the individual consumer, it tips over into OTCRX. Vitamin D is a great example where, depending on the dose on your packaging that you're basically telling the consumer to take, you go from a dietary supplement into pharmaceutical land, depending on dose. So even understanding dose. So a lot of the science, especially the academic science, has, where it's run at institutions where they can be more experimental, have very high dosing.
Yeah.
And they'll say, vitamin D is good for this, but they're at what regulators would consider very high. I wouldn't consider very high, but regulators definitely would. And it would put it into RX land potentially. But then companies are using that as a citation, but giving like 1/20th of the payload in the actual messaging to the consumer on pack, on label. So that's also where we help clean up that massive disconnect.
You clear up, yeah.
Yeah, because the bibliographies often look and smell right, but when we actually dig into them, they don't align with what's actually being given to the consumer by way of the labeling and positioning of the product.
Right.
That's also where we help clients and inform contract manufacturers on how that can be cleaned up so that they're all aligned and the consumer's not being even inadvertently
misled. Yeah. And I think too, we went from how can we pair up as a manufacturer, Nutrasource and Leaf, and then we're talking about Nutrasource and the client, and now you're talking about protecting the consumer, which is a place in my heart I hold very special. But before we wrap up here, I want to know if you know any trends upcoming we should be talking about.
Well, without violating any confidentiality agreements, I think one of the big trends in general, one of the hottest ingredients has been for a while, but it's really come to the forefront now, is prebiotics.
Yes.
That is a very big area. It's growing bigger all the time. We work very closely with the Global Prebiotics Association. We sit on their committees. We work on definitions, and we work on various regulatory, both positive and challenging issues that come up. But that trade group in particular globally has really grown, and that's a good indicator to me that prebiotics are being taken very seriously, and there are whole companies on the ingredient side formed around prebiotic portfolio.
And this is internationally, this is globally prebiotics, because I know in the US it's hitting pretty hard, but in many jurisdictions.
Europe on the regulatory side is somewhat behind from the standpoint of what you can put on pack on label. But I do feel like it'll come around at a point in time. But a lot of these prebiotic firms are out of the EU as well. They're not necessarily US-based firms. And of course, there's cross-pollination to different regions and so forth. So that's a very hot trend. On the companion animal side, a ton of work in prebiotics, jumping swim lanes from human focused SKUs to companion animal SKUs. And I think pre and probiotics have a big role to play there. And we've seen that for a while now, and that's really, really growing for sure.
Nice.
I think some of the other trends are around the delivery side. Yes. So looking at delivery technologies.
Bioavailability.
Fast acting is a big piece of the puzzle, and a lot of interest there, especially coming out of COVID on the immune health side. The innovation in immune health, obviously during COVID, that was a hot topic, no question, but that's really continued. So I'm seeing a lot of novel tech and delivery in that respect, as well as different routes of administration for immune health positioning.
Well, thank you for that insight.
You're welcome.
Let people watching this, future clientele, let us know where we can find you, how we can get a hold of you and get in contact.
Wonderful. So Nutrasource, Nutrasource.ca is our main website. Certifications by Nutrasource is our certification site. If you search that, you'll definitely find it. We also have Nutrasource on LinkedIn, Instagram, as well as our certifications with its own.
It's just LinkedIn, at Nutrasource?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
So Nutrasource.com also works. We're definitely out there. We are on the B2B side, and we always like to say we're large enough to service and small enough to care, and we really try to live that out in the client relationship and experience. Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here today. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Take care, Will.